Welcome, dear one, to this sacred space, where the gentle whispers of the Spirit are finally heard above the chaotic noise of the world. Settle in, breathe deeply, and allow the quiet recognition of your own soul to begin. We speak today of a phenomenon that is as old as time, yet profoundly relevant to your immediate, lived experience. We speak of the regret, a subtle, heavy mantle draped across the shoulders of those who once shared your light yet chose to turn away. It is not an emotion that erupts in a moment of dramatic realization, but a slow, creeping, spiritual acknowledgement that permeates their quiet hours, staining their seemingly cheerful moments with a cold, hollow truth. This regret is not merely emotional, it is an energetic withdrawal symptom, a deep psychic hunger for the high-frequency peace you once unconsciously provided. We must approach this subject with gentle sobriety, understanding that their pain is a byproduct of your progress, and their attempts to re-enter your life are not signs of love, but signals of their own spiritual destabilization. It is a curious reality of the spiritual journey. The closer you align with your true anointed path, the more palpable the distance becomes between you and those who operate within lower, unawakened frequencies. You, the chosen one, are designed to vibrate at a frequency of truth, integrity, and evolving divine purpose. Your vibrational signature is unique, characterized by resilience forged through hardship, compassion shaped by discernment, and an unwavering commitment to inward growth. Your presence is energetic, not merely physical, and this presence acts as a silent catalyst for truth. When you enter a room, you disrupt the illusions people hide behind. When you bond with a soul, you offer temporary access to a peace they cannot generate themselves. They never understood that the serenity they experienced around you was not circumstantial. It was spiritual. And here lies the foundation of their regret. They did not simply lose you in the relational sense. Time can soften the loss of a title or a role. What they lost was access to the emotional clarity, the spiritual grounding, and the energetic stability you carried so naturally. In the quiet hours when distractions fade and the world no longer provides noise to hide behind, they confront the chilling truth. The peace they once felt was never theirs. It was borrowed from your field. Imagine an oasis in an unforgiving desert. You were that oasis. They took freely from your well, assuming it would never run dry. They believed they could wander into darkness and return casually when the consequences became overwhelming. But spiritual doors do not reopen simply because someone regrets closing them. The universe honors alignment, not nostalgia. And now they feel the coldness, the spiritual chill that settles in when a high-frequency presence is removed. Their new connections feel shallow. Their pleasures feel dim, and their spirit feels exposed. They do not miss who you were. They miss who they were able to be in your presence. But chosen one, hear this with clarity. Their regret is confirmation of your ascension, not an invitation to reverse it. This is the moment to guard your peace, fortify your boundaries, and continue forward with unwavering spiritual authority. Having understood the weight of their regret, we now move into the 7 realizations they are quietly processing, each one affirming the power and necessity of your evolution. Point 1, the absence of unconditional clarity. The first and most immediate spiritual regret they harbor is tied directly to the removal of your unconditional clarity. This concept extends far beyond simple good advice. Your anointing grants you a specific type of discerning light, a spiritual radar that operates at a sensitivity level unattainable by the uninitiated. This clarity is a direct function of your willingness to surrender your ego and listen to higher guidance. Because you sought truth for its own sake, you possessed a clear, unbiased lens through which to view their circumstances. When you were in their life, they benefited from your ability to perceive truth and warn them of traps, pitfalls, and energetically mismatched connections, all without the personal bias or emotional entanglement that clouds their own judgment. You were a subtle yet highly effective spiritual filter and an energetic fact-checker. You saw the consequences of their actions long before they materialized, and you delivered those warnings with gentle, non-judgmental love. They heard you, but their ego convinced them you were interfering or perhaps simply lucky in your foresight. They believed they could outmaneuver the natural laws you gently tried to make visible. They believed they could outrun consequences that you knew were already forming in the unseen. And because they lacked humility, they assumed your clarity was optional rather than divinely bestowed. The psycho-spiritual mechanics of the loss. When you are removed, this field of clarity collapses. Their current environment is now comprised entirely of mirrors and echo chambers. People who tell them what they want to hear, affirming their self-deceptive narratives. Without your presence, there is no one to offer an unfiltered truth. They now live inside a psychological maze where every opinion is biased, every voice has an agenda, and every piece of guidance they receive is tainted by hidden motives. The spiritual consequences of their choices, which you once helped to soften or avoid, now arrive with brutal, unmitigated force. They are constantly navigating through confusion, second-guessing themselves, and making repeated mistakes that follow similar, predictable patterns. Their life begins to feel like a loop they cannot escape. They suddenly cannot see the forest for the trees. The light switch has been flicked off and they are left fumbling in a self-imposed darkness. This is a profound energetic shock. They are now experiencing decisions without your gentle, insightful counsel, and they realize they have plunged into chaos, missing the objective, non-emotional clarity you possessed. What they called interference was actually protection. What they labeled overthinking was actually foresight. What they dismissed as intuition was actually divine intelligence. Their regret is not about missing your voice, but about missing the accurate outcome prediction that came with your guidance. They regret brushing off the spiritual foresight you shared, recognizing now that it was not mere intuition, but a form of divine access that they took for granted. This regret is cold because it is tied to tangible, painful losses, financial, relational, and emotional, that have occurred since your departure, losses you had subtly and repeatedly cautioned them against. They now understand that every warning you gave was a loving attempt to steer them away from destruction, and yet they chose ego. They chose pride. They chose the validation of lesser minds over the uncomfortable truth that would have saved them. Now they are realizing something that cuts deeply. Wisdom is not inherent to their being. It was a resource they had freely borrowed from yours. Your presence was their stability. Your insight was their compass. Your discernment was their protection. Therefore, their attempt to return is a pragmatic search for stability, not a heartfelt pursuit of genuine connection. They are not returning because they love you. They are returning because they cannot navigate their own life without the clarity that once flowed effortlessly through you. Point 2, the loss of energetic peace. The second layer of their regret is fundamentally rooted in the loss of energetic peace. This is perhaps the most difficult realization for them to articulate, as it resides entirely outside the realm of linear thought and conventional emotion. You, the chosen one, radiated a powerful, calming, energetic field that acted as a spiritual stabilizer. This phenomenon is a natural byproduct of a soul committed to consistent internal purification and alignment with divine frequency. Your internal consistency created a coherent, tranquil field. When they were near you, they were subtly and continuously drawn up into this vibration. You unknowingly absorbed, processed, and neutralized much of the low-frequency, chaotic, and toxic energy they carried, the lingering stress from their own poor choices, the residue of negative environments, and the low-grade anxiety of their unresolved spiritual conflicts. This is a common, often exhausting burden of the anointed, but it was a profound, unearned benefit to those in your immediate sphere. To them it felt natural, effortless, and inexplicably comforting. To you, it was sacred labor disguised as ordinary presence. The psychospiritual mechanics of the loss. Without your stabilizing presence, their internal world has become seismically active. Their nervous system, which had become accustomed to the soothing lull of your energetic presence, is now in constant sympathetic fight or flight activation. They feel perpetually unsettled, unable to find the stillness they once accessed so easily. The daily anxieties, the spiritual pressures, and the raw, unprocessed negative emotions they once unconsciously offloaded onto you now sit heavily and exclusively upon their own shoulders. Their bodies, once regulated by the resonance of your calm, now vibrate at their true, unrefined frequency, disordered, erratic, and spiritually dehydrated. The spiritual static that surrounds them is deafening, making meditation impossible, simple concentration a struggle, and emotional clarity a distant memory. They miss the inexplicable soothing peace that simply being near you provided, the feeling of their own racing thoughts slowing down, the sudden ability to feel optimism, and the effortless sense of being safe. They remember the sensation of exhaling without knowing they had been holding their breath. What they interpreted as comfort was actually your regulated energy field, gently recalibrating theirs. Now, stripped of that influence, they are encountering themselves in a raw, unshielded form. This energetic deprivation manifests as restlessness, disturbed sleep, physical malaise, irritability, cognitive fog, and a gnawing spiritual hunger that cannot be satisfied by material comforts, superficial pleasures, or temporary distractions. Their soul is starving for the equilibrium that only divine alignment can provide, something you embodied, not something they ever cultivated. And so, in their confusion, they attach this hunger to your absence. They mistakenly attribute this profound discomfort to missing you, when in reality, they are missing the calm you represented, the sanctuary you provided, and the spiritual clarity you radiated. What they long for is not romance, companionship, or familiarity. It is regulation, peace, and coherence. They are mourning the loss of a lighthouse they did not know they were using to navigate their storm. They are experiencing their own true, unbuffered vibration for the first time in a long time, and it is terrifyingly chaotic. Their regret is not a simple emotional ache. It's a physiological and energetic cry for relief, a desperate attempt to plug back into a spiritual battery they carelessly drained. But that source was never meant to be their life support. You were a temporary grace, a divine intervention disguised as a person. The peace they yearn for is not gone. It is simply no longer accessible to them without doing the spiritual work they long avoided. Point 3, the validation of their own spiritual lack. The third deeper regret is the realization that they have forfeited the opportunity to use you as a benchmark for their own growth, leading to the painful validation of their own spiritual lack. Every true chosen one serves as a silent, living mirror, reflecting the vast potential and the stubbornly unaddressed issues of those around them. Your presence alone became an uncomfortable calibration tool. Your consistency exposed their inconsistency. Your discipline illuminated their avoidance, and your spiritual clarity highlighted their confusion. Your commitment to consistent, quiet spiritual development, your adherence to personal boundaries, and your disciplined pursuit of purpose highlighted, by stark contrast, their own commitment to spiritual stagnation, comfort-seeking, and emotional avoidance. They could not look at you without seeing the roadmap for the life they could be living if they were willing to embrace integrity, self-confrontation, humility, and inner discipline. This reflection was inherently uncomfortable, which is why they ultimately chose to remove themselves, preferring the company of those who would affirm their complacency. Being near you demanded growth. Being near them allowed them to stay the same. This is the exact point where their regret took root, not from losing you as an individual, but from losing the version of themselves they once imagined they could become while standing next to you. The psycho-spiritual mechanics of the loss. Now, having stepped away, they expected the internal pressure to cease, but the pressure has only intensified. Distance did not free them. It exposed them. The gap between where they are and where they should be has widened into an abyss. They are now forced to face the uncomfortable reality that your absence did not remove the mirror. It only removed the excuse. Without your presence to quietly inspire them, they can no longer pretend that their stagnation is circumstantial. Their inner voice has grown louder, sharper, and more insistent because the soul recognizes truth even when the ego tries to silence it. This mounting inner tension is what drives their desire to re-enter your life. Their attempt to re-establish contact is not genuinely about connecting with you as a person. It is an attempt to use your continuing success as a temporary, external source of validation for themselves. They seek access because a simple interaction with you, a brief affirmation from the one they know is walking in light, would momentarily soothe their ego and negate the immediate painful need for their own profound self-improvement. They want the feeling of growth without embracing the responsibility of growth. They want proximity to light without committing to the purification that the light requires. If you were to forgive them easily or accept their superficial attempt at reconciliation, it would allow them to believe they are good enough without having to change their core patterns. It would let them return to the illusion that spiritual association is the same as spiritual transformation. Their regret is therefore deeply rooted in their own spiritual cowardice. They regret losing the convenient external affirmation, the easy pass that your association once granted them. They miss having a spiritual friend they could name drop to convince themselves and others that they were still near the light. Their focus remains outward, on securing access to your energy, rather than inward, on addressing the foundational character flaws that caused the separation in the first place. They do not miss the relationship. They miss the ego boost the relationship provided. This is why you must recognize their renewed interest for what it truly is, a spiritual bribe designed to halt your own progress by diverting your focus back to their need for external validation. The test is not whether you can forgive them. The test is whether you can discern their motive clearly enough to protect your purpose. Point 4, the realization of your divine protection. The fourth, most chilling realization for them is the direct, painful acknowledgement of your divine protection and the shield you unknowingly provided. This operates on a highly esoteric level when you, a truly chosen individual, walk the anointed path, living in integrity and faith. You are enveloped in a cloak of high-frequency spiritual protection. This protection is so potent that it often extends outward, creating a subtle, invisible perimeter that shields those in your immediate, consistent sphere of influence from certain karmic consequences, spiritual attacks, and general misfortune. You were, by proxy, protected, and they were, by proxy, beneficiaries. Your path, your faith, and your obedience acted as a powerful spiritual insurance policy for them. They mistook this unusual run of good luck and minimized consequences for their own resilience or intelligence. They believed they were naturally favored, naturally untouchable, or naturally guided, when in truth, they were simply standing under the umbrella of your anointing, shielded by a grace that was never theirs to claim, only yours to carry. This is where the psycho-spiritual mechanics begin to unfold with brutal clarity. Since leaving your orbit, this secondary borrowed protection has vanished completely. Their life now feels overwhelmingly difficult, punctuated by relentless obstacles, seemingly random bad luck, and financial or relational losses that seem to cascade without explanation. They are bewildered by the sudden heaviness they feel every morning, the pressures that appear out of nowhere, and the conflicts that escalate with alarming speed. These aren't coincidences. They are karmic recalibrations. They are experiencing direct, swift, and often harsh consequences for actions that, when they were with you, seemed to carry no significant weight. Their old habits, once cushioned by your spiritual presence, now ricochet back onto them with full force. They are facing spiritual attacks, periods of intense psychic oppression, or simply an alarming increase in negative, manipulative encounters that were previously buffered by your anointing. The social circles that once felt easy now feel predatory. The opportunities that once opened effortlessly now slam shut. Even their sleep may become chaotic, their dreams unsettled, and their mind restless, because the peace they enjoyed was not their own. It was borrowed from your spiritual frequency. They look back and see the path with you as one of inexplicable ease, calm, and stability, which has now been replaced by struggle, complexity, and constant warfare. The contrast is so severe, so undeniable, that they can no longer lie to themselves about the source of their former stability. Their internal spiritual accounting reveals the truth. They were not truly lucky. They were merely standing in your shadow. They are realizing, sometimes slowly and sometimes in a sudden jolt of clarity, that your presence aligned their life in ways they never recognized or appreciated. Your energy repelled danger. Your intuition redirected disaster. Your prayers softened consequences that were meant for them. And now, without your covering, they finally see the true weight of their own decisions. Their regret is a cold, calculated response to their own suffering. It is not born from emotional maturity or moral awakening, but from a dawning awareness that their downfall began the moment they stepped away from your light. They recognize on a deep subconscious level that the cost of their freedom from you has been their spiritual and emotional safety. Their desire to return is a desperate attempt to re-establish the spiritual insurance policy that they carelessly let lapse, proving that their motivation is fear of consequence, not true love or remorse. They do not miss you, they miss the protection that your presence provided. And that is the harsh, spiritual truth they can no longer deny. Point 5, they miss the frequency of high truth. The fifth dimension of their profound regret centers on the abrupt removal of your frequency of high truth. This extends far beyond simple conversation or casual companionship. Your soul was, and still is, anchored in a higher plane of consciousness. And because of that, every interaction you had with them carried a purity, a purpose, and an elevated spiritual resonance they were not accustomed to. Your presence was a calibration to a higher standard. Your words were never random. They carried intention. Whether you were discussing a challenge, sharing a perspective, or even commenting on something as mundane as the weather, you spoke from a place of insight that drew from higher discernment. You breathed life, possibility, and potential into their being without ever announcing that you were doing so. You reframed their struggles through the lens of spiritual meaning and divine timing. You prevented them from drowning in the superficial by consistently lifting their awareness to the deeper architecture beneath their experiences. Simply by standing near you, they were being raised, aligned, and spiritually ventilated. They did not realize that what they were experiencing was not normal. It was the influence of a soul operating at a higher frequency. Losing that was not just losing a conversational partner, it was losing a rare source of spiritual oxygen. The psycho-spiritual mechanics of this loss are now unfolding around them with full force. They are currently surrounded by low-frequency, draining interaction, gossip, complaint, envy, projection, and emotional stagnation. Every conversation they now entertain leaves a film of heaviness on their spirit. They feel an internal sinking with every petty argument, every superficial exchange, and every ego-driven outburst. Their environment feeds their inner turmoil, not their evolution. And in this low vibration ecosystem, they are prevented from accessing the better version of themselves that once emerged naturally in your presence. They miss the subtle yet powerful pull you exerted toward goodness, purpose, clarity, and sincerity. They miss the way your perspective cuts through confusion. They miss the way your voice gently redirected them away from self-sabotage. You elevated their intellectual and spiritual diet without ever forcing them to change. Now their dialogue is transactional, emotionally flat, and spiritually dehydrating. The world around them suddenly sounds hollow because it lacks the resonance of truth they once tasted through you. And here's the deeper truth. They now recognize, perhaps for the first time in their lives, that you were not merely sharing opinions. You were speaking from a state of internal alignment and integrity that is exceedingly rare. The regret that rises within them now is not simply emotional. It is a deep intellectual and spiritual yearning for substance, for meaning, for the energetic clarity that your presence provided. They are exhausted by the emotional maintenance required by low-vibration relationships, the endless cycles of complaint, the never-ending need for validation, the absence of real growth, and the repetitive drama that leads nowhere. They miss the spiritual lift you gave them, the way you cleared the static from their minds and helped them see themselves with greater truth. Their attempt to re-engage with you is not casual. It is an unconscious plea for the nourishment they lost: intellectual stimulation, emotional grounding, and spiritual activation. They are reaching for the one person who challenged them to rise beyond the temporal and strive for the eternal. But here lies the higher wisdom. To allow them back is to voluntarily become a permanent supplier of free spiritual nourishment to a soul that refused to cultivate its own inner garden. And the chosen do not exist to indefinitely sustain those who choose stagnation over growth. Point 6, the painful acknowledgement of your value. The 6th, heavily weighted layer of their regret is the painful, unavoidable acknowledgement of your true value. This is the stage where the spiritual lesson transitions into a tangible social and emotional realization. True spiritual value is rarely recognized and appreciated in the moment it is offered, freely and consistently. It is only fully comprehended after it has been definitively withdrawn, and the profound scarcity of such an individual becomes undeniably evident. They believed your loyalty was weakness, your forgiveness was necessity, and your consistency was simply dull predictability. They believed they could find someone better, more exciting, more compliant, or more outwardly impressive. They mistook your steadiness for stagnation, your humility for lack of ambition, and your grace for naivety. They failed to understand that you were not lacking intensity. You were practicing emotional restraint. You were not lacking options. You were practicing discernment. You were not lacking power. You were practicing mercy. And now the quiet truth they ignored is roaring through the chambers of their conscience. You were never ordinary. You were the rare alignment of love, loyalty, depth, and divine purpose, and they mishandled it as if it were replaceable. The psycho-spiritual mechanics of the loss. They are now in the painful process of comparing you to every new person who enters their life. And the result of that comparison is universally, starkly clear. Everyone else is lacking. Every new interaction feels hollow, hurried, or transactional. They are meeting individuals who are only interested in what they can get, who lack the depth of character, the self-mastery, the loyalty, and the spiritual consistency that you possessed. Conversations feel shallow, intentions feel questionable, and connections feel temporary. They now see how rare it is to meet someone who loves without hidden motives, who shows up without being begged, and who remains consistent without being controlled. They realize the depth of your character, the quiet power of your faith, and the pure, non-transactional loyalty of your spirit were not common, but an extremely rare spiritual blessing they squandered with casual cruelty or thoughtless neglect. They now understand that what they called boring was actually stability. What they called rigid was actually integrity. And what they called too spiritual was actually anointing. And that revelation cuts deeply. This regret is laced with self-contempt. They see their own lack of discernment, their inability to recognize gold while they possessed it, and they are forced to confront the poor judgment that led them to prioritize fleeting, superficial connections over profound, sacred ones. They replay moments where you showed love, patience, and understanding, and they now see how their ego minimized those moments and how their immaturity mocked what their soul now mourns. They recognize the value of your soul, but this recognition does not translate to readiness. It translates to a desperate fear that they will never find your equivalent, and therefore their last hope is to convince you to return and fill the gaping void their own actions created. They are not returning because they evolved. They are returning because life has revealed the truth of who you were all along. Their regret is not a gentle longing. It is a spiritual reckoning. They now understand that losing someone like you is not an event. It is a lifelong deficit. And deep down, they know something even heavier. The version of you they once knew no longer exists. You have transformed. You have risen. And while they are just waking up to your value, you are already walking in a realm where their access has expired. Point 7, the sacred command of non-return. The seventh and final point is the sacred command of non-return, which is directed squarely at you, the chosen one. Understand that the closure of this door is not an act of punishment or petty revenge. It is an act of divine preparation and necessary spatial cleansing. The universe or spirit has performed a meticulous extraction. It has deliberately cleared this specific space in your life, creating a vacuum that can now only be filled by the people, resources, and high-level assignments that are truly aligned with your next, higher and more challenging phase of spiritual ascension. The void is deliberate. The psycho-spiritual mechanics of the boundary, their attempt to return, is not simply a plea for reconciliation. It is the ultimate spiritual test of your newly established boundary and your maturity in your calling. The moment a person or situation that belongs to your old, lower vibration attempts to re-enter, it tests your commitment to the new vibration you now embody. If you allow them back, you are effectively sending a signal to the universe that you are not serious about the elevation you have just undergone. You're refusing the spiritual promotion being offered to you. You're stating that the familiar chaos is preferable to the unknown discipline of the new path. The spiritual directive is clear, profound, and utterly non-negotiable. What was released in a lower frequency cannot, under any circumstance, be permitted to re-enter a higher one. To re-engage would be to invite the precise circumstances, the energy drain, and the limiting beliefs that the divine hand just spent so much effort removing. You must recognize that their presence served a purpose in your past, teaching you lessons of patience, resilience, and boundary setting. That cycle is complete. Your current assignment requires maximum energetic focus and unburdened space. You must honor your commitment to the path above your momentary temptation to alleviate their suffering. The most compassionate thing you can do for them is to hold the boundary firm, forcing them to turn inward and finally seek their own clarity and healing, rather than continuing to steal yours. This final firm boundary is the capstone of your current spiritual lesson, and the absolutely necessary step to receive the next wave of divine assignments meant only for the unburdened. Dear chosen soul, understand this entire process, their regret, their attempts, and your successful resilience, as a profound and undeniable validation of your path. Their pain is not a signal for reunion, but a powerful, energetic testament to your transformed, high-vibration existence. You have evolved past the need for that dynamic. You are now guarding a new, more refined and consecrated spiritual garden, and your highest duty is to protect the precious, sacred energy that resides within it. Take this knowledge not as a source of pride or judgment, but as a sober, solemn acknowledgement of your divine value and the responsibility that comes with your anointing. Continue to walk gently, mindfully, and soberly on your path. The journey forward is often quieter, often lonelier, but it is infinitely more fulfilling and precisely where you are meant to be. Embrace the silence, embrace the solitude. Your next season of blessings, your truest alignment, and your most potent assignments require the clear, unburdened, and protected space you have just created. Hold the line. Peace be with you. You are loved. You are chosen. Now go and continue to walk the anointed path, and allow nothing to divert your sacred gaze.